Hello, how are you? We will go ahead and call this meeting to order. Dr. Means is going to help us with the roll call. Dr. Knott. Here. Mr. Worthy. Here. Ms. Davis.
Here.
Mr. Bybee. Here. Ms. Ellis.
Here.
Mr. Davis. Here. Thank you. Our first item is to amend or adopt the agenda that we have to provide. Is there a motion? Moved by Ms. Davis to adopt the agenda?
Yes.
Is that right?
I second it.
Second by Mr. Worthy. Any questions or concerns? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And we'll move on to item C, which is information items, which is our future facilities use report. And I'll hand the time over to Dr. Means.
Well, thank you, Mr. Bybee.
Sorry, Dr. Means, if I might, I'd just like to thank you folks for showing up tonight. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for being engaged in the school district. Thank you for being engaged in the things that matter to our kids. And that's it. Thank you for being here. I appreciate that.
Thank you, sir. I want to start by thanking our team of administrators who assisted me together what I believe to be an extremely comprehensive review of all facilities in the Clark County School District. Many of those individuals are here this evening, and I just want to personally thank you for your time, effort. I don't pretend that what we're recommending this evening to certain members of the community will be popular or will be accepted. But when I think about the rationale behind what is being shared with the board and the community, it is ultimately about children. It's been said to me that it would be prudent to think about a political response or to find a middle ground to make everyone happy who's seeking something from this situation. As a school superintendent, I'm not a politician. I'm not a politician in any way, shape, or form. I'm not part of an elected body that ran for office like a board member or someone on a commission. My sole purpose of being in this community is to become the best advocate for children in Clark County. And so what you see in these recommendations this evening is based around what our children need in this community. If you have questions about this presentation, about the recommendations that have been posed to the Board of Education, please, there's an email here. You may email your questions. If you email your questions by 9:30 this evening, we will our team will answer questions. Anything past 9:30 this evening, we'll take them and analyze them, and we'll post those responses at a later date. So again, this is the email that you can utilize either here in the atrium or at home. So what is the why? Before jumping into what is the why? The why ultimately is regarding our children. The number 136 is extremely important because we have 136 4-year-old children in this community who were placed on a waiting list to get into pre-kindergarten this year. 136 students were denied access to a high-quality education because we didn't have space. The why is because we know we have an equitable and imbalanced distribution of student assignments throughout this community. And the why is because we understand as a school system that we could do more, and we can do more, and we must do more in the area of providing social services to our students. But you need space to provide those services. I don't want to read to you the entire thing. I'm hoping that we can jump into discussing the recommendations. So here's just a few of the reasons why we have come to the conclusion that we're sharing with the board and community this evening. I think everyone has seen our mission statement. If you haven't, please make sure that you take a look at what drives us and what is the foundation of our work. It is ultimately around our commitment to equity and excellence for every child in this community. And when you look at our facility layout, we're not providing equity and excellence for every child in Clark County. And when you take a look at our theory of action and truly analyze it, we're unable to eliminate the marginalization of historically underrepresented groups in this community. Again, partially because of a lack of facilities. So when you look at the work that we're presenting to you here, the real crux of the work, what's in the middle of it, is us putting students first. Not agendas, but students. The work is also aligned to our strategic plan. At a later date and time, you can take a look at the alignment between our 6 strategic priorities and the work that is being presented in this packet and report. So let's get to the recommendations. The recommendations include, number 1, demolish the 2 buildings at West Broad campus and rebuild a 2-story building to become an Office of Early Learning Center with 10 classrooms. The 2 buildings would be the building facing West Broad and the current 2-story building in back of that building. The historic building, going to number 2, the historic building that we consider at West Broad would be preserved. And it would be preserved for 4 reasons. 1 is to provide a school-based health clinic for all children in Clark County. 2 would be to provide a parent information center. 3 is community rooms for meetings and gathering of community groups. And the 4th is the historic recognition of education in the Athens Clark County community. The 3rd recommendation is that the district purchase an office space for the repurposing of serving as district services and district office facility. I'll dive into that recommendation a little bit more later. Number 4 is to establish permanent boundary lines for the Maxine P. Eastham attended zone area, eliminating the choice option for attended zones. Right now, children who live in the Maxine P. Eastham zone have the choice of selecting what school they want to go to between Whit Davis, Barnett Shoals, and Gaines. The vast majority, over 90% of those families, choose either Barnett Shoals or Whit Davis, while many of them live closer to Gaines. And so, before I go on to the next 4 recommendations, this is a model And it's a very preliminary draft, but it is a model of what the West Broad facility could look like. This would serve as the early childhood center area. This is the historic building that is preserved where we would have a health clinic. You would also provide other services meeting the needs of our community. Number 5 is to redraw boundary lines to assign a community of students to Howard B. Stroud. These students are currently attending Gaines Elementary School, and when you look at the map, they're actually closer, they live closer to Stroud than they do to Gaines. Number 6 is to construct School C. School C was a concept that the Board of Education considered many years ago prior to the economic downturn of 2008, and that concept was put on hold. So our recommendation that school be constructed and boundary lines for schools impacted by School C would be adjusted toward the beginning of that school being open. Subsequently, the construction of a brand new Clark Middle School or renovation of Clark Middle would be delayed until SPLOST 6 or at a minimum 2023. And then the final recommendation is to renovate Old Gaines at the conclusion of its current purpose of housing Hillsman Middle School to become an educational center that includes an office of early learning, a boys and girls club or youth center of some sort, a junior achievement biz town, and community meeting groups. This is the concept right now of what Old Gaines could become. The historic building would be preserved. This building would become, and it's our vision that it become the Maxine P. Esom Early Childhood Education Center. This facility would become our junior achievement biz town area, and this would be a youth center that could be used by either leisure services and or the Boys and Girls Club. Mr. Bobby, I don't want to drone on and talk at the entire evening. Let me pause here for a second and see if there are questions from the Board of Education before we jump into proposed timeline.
Let me ask one question around the presentation. Will you make this presentation available on board docs or something like this? I think it's already available. This presentation?
Yeah.
We'll make it available
Tonight. Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Means, going back, I can't recall what frame it was, but anyway, when we made the first 3 recommendations, and you talked about space, and you showed a model, in terms of West Broad. My question is this: space, everything gonna be on? I know showing the model now, it's on one level, but is everything gonna be on one level?
From a construction standpoint, we have to have exit levels where students are able to leave the building on level. So, while it's a 2-story building, there will be exit ways where they are on ground.
Okay, all right. Now, the next portion, the model that you showed, and you were talking about Stroud and Gaines, and there are students at Gaines now that probably should be at Stroud. Now, in terms of doing that, that's going to sort of equalize the enrollment of those elementary students.
In the report, Mr. Worthy, you'll note that Gaines is one of our schools that's over capacity right now.
Yes.
We have a number of temporary classrooms located there and I think we actually have so right now, if you take a look at this sliver of children in the circle are actually assigned to Gaines Elementary School.
Okay.
But you'll see that's Stroud right there. And so we believe it's more prudent for them to attend Howard B. Stroud versus Gaines, obviously because there's some capacity issues that we're worried about.
And seemingly they are closer.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
In terms of microphone, tell you right. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
In terms of the renovation of the buildings at West Broad School, the older one,
Yes, sir.
in the report, it talks about a community, access to the community. How would that be done in terms of evening times, weekends?
Creating access to the facility is not a difficult thing to do. You would ultimately have to have support staff to be present to support those reservations. But it would ultimately come down to community groups reserving the space, us identifying what days we have staff available to allow the community to use those areas. It's very easy to accomplish and to facilitate.
Because I know when we do it in the schools, I think sometimes in the public schools, that we put a charge to it, I think.
Yes, sir.
So would that be done kind of the
I
same
think
way?
that's something that would be open for conversation. The more we can make the West Broad facility a community hub, the better.
And one other question, when we talk about, I think earlier this morning you used the word school-based clinic, I think.
Yes, sir.
Okay, is that the same thing as a community clinic, or it's not? Tell me what's a school-based clinic look like?
A school-based clinic is for young people who attend the schools in Clark County who have medical needs. We are able to provide those services to them through a school-based health clinic. Not a community health clinic. It's a health clinic that is school-based and serves the children of Clark County School District.
So would that be something to supplement with the nurses we have in the schools? Is that?
Our nursing staff would clearly be part of the service delivery model, but there's also opportunities for us to work with health providers in the community as well, to make sure that those services are being provided and available to our children. So there are models where not only your school nurses are providing the services, but also local health providers are pushing in and providing those services as well. In fact, we had an extremely successful meeting this morning with community leaders in the healthcare field as we continue to explore the creation of a school-based health clinic. Very pleased to report, due to the work of Claire Suggs and Amy Roark, our lead school nurse, and Dr. Dawn Myers, that we have a very strong commitment of at least $300,000 to move forward with a school-based health clinic. We currently have a $10,000 grant that has been given to the school district by Emory University to do some planning for a school-based health clinic, but that planning has been accelerated because of the interest from community leaders in the healthcare field who want to help the school district and provide this extra level of service.
Dr. Means, I'm quite sure this was mentioned with the space pertaining to West Broad, but somehow maybe I overlooked it. With all of those facilities that you mentioned, all of those funds would be in SPLOS 5?
Yes, sir. They've already been identified as SPLOS 5.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I believe you mentioned, well, I think I saw SPLOS 6, and that would take future facilities like Clark Middle, et cetera.
We believe that right now our SPLOS dollars, let's talk about that for a second.
Sure.
We've projected a monthly intake of $1.8 million with SPLOS 5. We've actually been tracking, and it's one of the reports that the board receives on a monthly basis. We've been tracking on an average of the past year a little over $2 million. If those projections continue, and we also continue to have positive results with our final capital outlay, or the final bill, if you will, the projects that we are we're currently in the midst of constructing things like Coyle and BHL, Hillsman, and we're starting to wrap up Oglethorpe. If we do our due diligence, we believe that at the end of SPLOST 5, we'll have $20 million for a construction project. Now, when you consider $20 million, that's a lot of money, but it won't be enough money to construct a new Clark Middle School. We'll be in the same situation that the community was in a few years ago with Clark Central, where you had to actually bridge the construction and the work for Clark Central over a number of different SPLOST referendums. So we believe that the $20 million, however, is an appropriate number for construction of an elementary school. And when you consider the fact that on the west side of town, we have 3 schools that are over capacity. You have Chase Street, that's over capacity. You have Whitehead Road, that's over capacity. And you have Timothy, that is 3 students away from capacity. We have significant imbalance there. And so by constructing School C, that would be a positive thing. The last thing I would share with you is that if you look at the map, there are at least 500 students already in residence in that zone right now that would be considered School C. So for a number of different reasons, we think that it's appropriate and it actually helps our vision of maintaining low class sizes across all of our elementary schools by having a 15th elementary school online. Again, keeping the focus on academics, keeping the focus on helping young people grow from a social, emotional, and academic perspective. We believe that a 15th elementary school will be helpful. Yes, ma'am.
Back when School C and Maxine Peace Elementary schools were, when the board decided not to move forward on that construction, it wasn't because we didn't have the SPLOST funding to build the buildings, it was because we didn't have the general funding to open, staff, and maintain the buildings. So while the SPLOST funding is available, do you feel that the district is in a sustainable, fiscally, financially sustainable place where we can staff and maintain those buildings in the same way? Because that was the reason for the cut. It was never about SPLOST money, it was about operational money.
We would make the sacrifice in our operational budget to provide the overhead costs of a 15th elementary school. And that means you have to find the funds for a principal, an assistant principal, an instructional coach. But it's important to know that with all of our overcrowded schools and temporary buildings, we have ample staff. We have staff in place right now. We're reducing class size, but we're reducing class size in tight buildings. If we could create a 15th elementary school, now you're not splitting classes in tight facilities, you're splitting classes and creating low class sizes in a brand new school, where you see an increase in enrollment and interest of more home buildings.
So in terms of the operational costs on a year-to-year basis, adding another elementary school, how much money would that be from our general budget each year?
1.5. No, and you do it once because you have to make the cut once, and then you've decided that you're not spending it on something and you're going to invest it in something else. It would be somewhere between 1.5 and $2 million, depending on the experience that you would bring in for a principal and an assistant principal, how many administrative assistants you would have in a building. But it would require us to make a reduction anywhere between 1.5 to $2 million.
And that would come out of other things.
Other things that we're currently doing. But please know, we've made a commitment to low class sizes right now. And so if we want to continue to have low class sizes right now, we would have to make that same type of tough decision. The only thing is, those teachers would be teaching in temporary buildings. Our recommendation is that they would be in a brand new building. And also you're allowing teachers who are in existing buildings to have the space that they deserve. So in other words, you're not asking special education teachers to go to a temporary building outside. You're not asking for EIP teachers who work with our struggling students to go to a temporary building. We haven't talked about this yet, but the issue of school safety should be considered. When you have so many temporary buildings, access to the public is greater. And so by having a 15th elementary school online, we believe that not only are we making our schools safer, but it's more equitable because you're not asking the students who need those services to often go out to their gifted teacher in the temporary building. They're actually in a school.
Dr. Means,
Yes, sir.
I think you're right on target because several years ago, the Board of Education, and obviously we have two board members now, and this was what I'm getting ready to say was centered around building the Maxine P. Eason Elementary School. But anyway, we all discussed this, and it was decided that with every elementary school try to have the enrollment somewhere around 500, maybe slightly above. You get that, especially a district this size, because when you allow an elementary school to get so large, you just lose the identity of your student body. We talked about that several years ago.
So just to follow up on which schools, let's see. So we're relieving the overcrowding in which schools on the west side?
Chase Street,
Chase,
Timothy, Whitehead. And candidly, we don't know what the impact will be in future years for Oglesboro. We overbuilt that building as well. Just as a follow-up to Mr. Worthy's statement, I think what Dr. Luther McDaniel is doing at Whitehead is amazing. When you have an elementary school of over 800 students, the way that he leads that building is incredible. We're lucky to have someone of his caliber and the rest of that faculty's caliber, but that's not normal. And we're putting a lot of stress on that faculty and that building because of the size of Whitehead. Yes, sir.
Dr. Means, if it's in here, just point me to the page and that would be great. But looking at SPOS 5, looking at I think that the original projection was $120 million that it was raised. And do you have in here how much has been already dedicated for for VHL, for Coral, for Hillsman, and any other projects that we've already kind of dedicated for? And then have we taken that number and then also included monies that are in this proposal for various items? I won't go through them now, but I feel like I need to get kind of a dollar and cents.
Absolutely, Mr. Davis, we can get that for you.
Is it in here?
We don't have a tally of how much we've dedicated to SPLOST 5 projects to date. We can provide that for you, and we'll have it for you by tomorrow morning. And we can also provide to you by tomorrow morning. And I think, frankly, you can do the numbers are right in the chart, but we can tally up what we are recommending for additional projects within SPLOST 5 as well.
Because I know we're talking about, building school C, we're talking about, the tearing down and the construction at West Broad and the early learning. If we could separate that part from the West Broad site itself, I mean, the 1936, I think, building, what it would cost to renovate that building. So separate those two if we could. And then also in terms of, if we said, and there were some things that were discussed this morning that I'm not going to elaborate on, but but we threw out some cost numbers there as well on like other things that we were hoping to get accomplished through SPLOST 5.
So let's just be transparent.
Okay.
What you're referring to, Mr. Davis, is that there is a committee called the Citizen Oversight Committee. And there was a gathering of that committee this morning to provide them a courtesy of what was being presented and what's being presented this evening. So that's the meeting that you're referencing.
Right.
And so please help me understand what numbers are you referencing?
Well, we're talking about, perhaps, doing some, like a new gym at Clark Middle, which a price tag was given. The early learning site at Old Gaines, what that would cost, and then the district offices, purchase and renovation.
So let's start backwards, Mr. Davis. In the report, there is an estimated cost for a new district office, and that is estimated between $2.1 to $2.5 million.
And that's purchase and renovation.
That's purchase. That's purchasing the property. I think they're in that chart. I can't remember what page it's on, but it's 15. Thank you, Ms. Potter. On page 15, it shows you how much the purchase cost would be and how much construction would be. I think overall, the total price, I think we estimated $4 million, if I remember correctly, for the construction of a new district office. That is consistent with what my predecessor estimated for a new district office on West Broad. So that $6 million range is what has been used in this community for a while. So that answers the question about the district office.
Right.
You referenced Clark Middle. I've had an opportunity to speak with the building principal at Clark Middle. I still, at some point, would embrace the opportunity to talk with the school community at Clark Middle if the board moves forward with certain portions of this. I don't want to get too far ahead of things, and we'll talk about timeline in a second again. But the very preliminary response to we may need to delay the construction of a new Clark Middle, the response from school leadership at that school was, well, can you at least, at a minimum, build a new gym? The gym at Clark Middle is dated. And it would be nice to have a new gym. There's complications with that request. The complication is that we would be doing the same thing that we've done to ourselves at Hilton. We've constructed a very nice gymnasium there. Now we have to build a brand new school around that gym. So that's a challenge. But Mr. Gilbert is a trained engineer from Georgia Tech. I'm sure he's up for the challenge. We estimated that a new gym would be somewhere around 10,000 square feet. And if you estimate that it's $150 to $175 per square foot, that is a $1.5 to $1.75 million project. And so if we wanted to, at a minimum, from a temporary intermediate solution, if we wanted to build a new gym, that's the cost associated with it. I hope I answered all your questions.
I have a question, and then let's think about, because I don't want to ask questions of the meat of things that you want to present about. So I know each of these recommendations have some meat that we can go into, if that makes the most sense, or gather questions. I'll leave that to you to kind of structure this conversation.
I'm sensitive to wanting to address every question you have.
Yeah.
Because again, we as a team, we spent a lot of time focusing on good solutions here and solutions that were really that would support our academic program, right. and also our vision and hope for stronger social service community school features.
And in the report, there's meat on the bones about each of these.
Yes, sir.
Like, for example, I know you talked about doing away with the choice attendance zone, but in the report we talked about grandfathering the current students to make sure that there's not a disruption to those students. So, but my question is around the early learning sites, early learning here on the west side and also on the east side, because we have a few different age groups and a few different ways we pay for each of those, right? So we have pre-K paid for by lottery.
Yes, sir.
And we have childhood, which is Head Start, early Head Start, if I understand all this correctly, paid for by
Federal government.
Federal government grants, also through ways we do that. So if we build the pre-K classrooms, are we guaranteed the funding from lottery to be able to fund those classrooms on the pre-K side? And then how confident are we on the Head Start, early Head Start, that other early learning component, that we can have the funds necessary to operate those?
There's no 100% guarantee. Let me start there. But both gubernatorial candidates have spoken highly around their support for early childhood education. Both candidates. So whatever happens on Tuesday, the candidates have indicated that they understand the importance of early childhood education. I think that's a signal that state leadership understand that just funding this very important educational function through lottery dollars may not be enough. And that's positive. That's a good thing. The trend at the federal level, despite leadership challenges and philosophical challenges in the Department of Education, has stayed steady. And so funding for early childhood education from the Department of Education has remained strong. Last evening, the Board of Education allowed Ms. Hickenbottom, our leader of early childhood education, to pursue on a preliminary basis. You'll finalize the vote next week Thursday, but you approved her to continue to pursue early Head Start grant from the federal government that has just been released. In short, there's no guarantee, but the trend has been very strong in supporting early childhood education, and the funding mechanisms that are currently in place seem to be a positive trend.
So you're confident in the fact that if we build these classrooms, we can fund that. We can pay for that.
I am unable to give you a 100% guarantee, but I can share with you that there is a very positive and strong trend right now that early childhood education has been supported both at the state and federal level. Again, despite some difficult philosophical challenges with education from leaders at both the state level and the federal level, from my perspective. I have to put that caveat.
Yes, sir. John.
Are there other continuing operational costs associated with other parts of the project? I asked about this, the elementary school, what about other things that are in this plan?
I think Mr. Davis alluded to this earlier. I think the expansion of services at West Broad and also the vision for the Old Gaines campus is an expansion of services. So custodial services would obviously, plant services would be taxed and have to be deployed to those facilities to keep them in a good sustainable position.
And so what about the big campus on the east side? Would that be because so many different groups seem to be involved with that. There's the Boys and Girls Club, there's Junior Achievement, which I wasn't aware of till now. Are they going to be paying for most of this? What is the district's role in that campus?
Sure. So 2 months ago, when I informed the entire Board of Education that the district was in conversation with Junior Achievement to bring a biz town to our community, the concept was that we have, and Junior Achievement is continuing to work on this, a private donor that is willing to donate up to $4 million to make a biz town possible for the children in Clark County. Now, I think Junior Achievement would also want to make that biz town available to surrounding counties as well. But the board has been properly informed and notified about the ongoing conversations with Junior Achievement. It's in the report, what we have recommended, and I've had a preliminary conversation with the county manager. The district's plan is to submit proposals, which are due, I believe, November 11th, to the county government for support on their SPLOS agenda, and to have the youth center that is identified on that Old Gaines campus and the construction of the financial literacy Junior Achievement building part of their work with SPLOS. The interior, which is fairly significant in terms of what Junior Achievement would have to provide, that interior, much that $4 million will go towards making the biz town as great as we want it to be.
how many road access points are there for that? In terms of the campus, you can go to one of your programs.
I think, it's interesting. Our team was very hesitant to share some of these models, because I think now we're getting into work that typically happens between the school system and the county government from a planning perspective when projects are more stable. And so I understand that this corridor is tough from a traffic perspective. It is our goal, if this continues to move forward, that we would have multiple entry points where the traffic flow is reasonable. Right now, it's not. That's a tough corridor right now from a traffic standpoint. But final conversations, Dr. Knotts, would start when we're able to talk with the county government and the projects are more stable.
Yeah, well, actually a different topic. We'll move off of that. Could you help kind of connect last night's discussion with tonight's in terms of highlighting the role of the University of Virginia, the PLE, and what's going on? I think that might help.
So in the report, and I hope everyone reads the report. Because I think, to provide an overview, I think, Mr. Biden, you said it best. I think there's a lot more detail to it. But what is recommended in this report is that we create zones, that we focus on some of our most struggling schools, and in schools that have the potential, pending your approval, to work with a evidence-based organization like the University of Virginia. We would want to not only provide academic support to those schools, but also community service and community school support opportunities as well. I think sometimes we, in educational conversations, we get into an either or, and I would prefer to think of this as a yes and. And so, yes, we have to do more from an academic standpoint. That's where the partnership with the University of Virginia will come into play. But in that portion of the report, we also talk about ensuring that we're pushing more social service opportunities to those schools. It's important to note that last night, when a representative from the University of Virginia partnership program was here, they talked about the fact that it's critical that the school district is held responsible in giving schools what they need. And so if you have a struggling school, you know you need 2 social workers, then that's incumbent on us to have the tough conversation to get 2 social workers there. Or if you know that you need to have even smaller class sizes, then that's our job to have those discussions and get the resources needed, not only academically, but again, socially.
Sorry, as a matter of progressing through the meeting, do you want to keep going like we're doing?
I am prepared and very happy to answer any questions you have. I think, if I may,
recommendation.
Maybe what I could do, Mr. President, is just talk about the timeline. And I think once we talk about the timeline, then that is the conclusion of what I have to share from general substance.
Does that sound okay with the board members? Okay, great. Thank you.
So from a governance standpoint, our administrative team is proposing that you, as a Board of Education, act on each of these recommendations separately. Per policy, you're supposed to act on, either accept or reject proposals that we bring to you that's over $80,000. So we're not presenting this to you as a package. We're not asking you to vote on this in the near future. There's a timeline that will lay out what needs to happen over the course of, frankly, the next 1.5 to 2 years regarding all of these different projects. The first step is to select an architectural firm. Right now, the way that we engage with an architectural firm is based on a project. We're asking that we pursue a relationship with an architectural firm where we have them on retainer, and there are multiple projects that they can pick up for the district at one time. You'll see then that there is a submission for design by whatever architectural firm is selected to design both a new board office and a West Broad facility. Also in February, we believe that we will be prepared to present a purchase of a property for the board office. In March of 2019, we would propose a construction contract for a new board office. We would like, ideally, to, if all goes well, to be moved out of this facility by this summer. That's critical because our career academy is unable to grow at the rate that they would like to grow because the district office is here. We're pausing and impeding the growth of the career academy. So that's the first set of proposals and actions. The second is action to approve the demolition and construction contract for the West Broad facility. The memorandum of understanding concludes with the Athens Land Trust in September of 2019. So the timing is appropriate. Action to approve the architectural contract and design for School C would then start. We would start the process of trying to develop a vision for what School C could be. The demolition of the two West Broad facilities that I mentioned earlier, not the historic building, would happen in October of 2019. Then we would pivot to the action to approve a contract to demolish old games. That demolition would then happen in December of 2019 with a contract to approve and to move forward with a School C construction in July 2020. All of those would be separate actions that the Board of Education from a governance standpoint would either approve or reject. Yes.
So the first action that you're asking from the board in December 2018, that hiring an architectural firm would only be to design the new board facilities.
No, sir.
In the West Broad.
No, sir.
Okay. What would be involved?
They would be our architectural firm. We would continue to go to that firm for all the different projects that have been identified in this report.
Okay, what about on September 19th, we're paying 10% action to approve architectural contract with the design.
Yes, sir.
School C.
Yes, sir.
So that would be under that.
It would, because although we have a firm that we would be working with and we would confirm, it's still an expenditure over $80,000. So we have to come to you to execute that design process.
So we've often entered into multi-year contracts with firms, especially most of our construction is 3 to 5 years. So is that what we're talking about here with the architectural firm, probably a 3-year commitment?
Yes. Well, keep in mind what you've been doing is you've engaged with architectural firms on a project by project basis.
Yes.
What we're suggesting starting in December is that you engage with an architectural firm that would be a one-stop shop that would have the ability to work on multiple projects for Clark County.
And so the $575,000, that would be essentially like a monthly fee? Is that kind of what it is?
That's based off of the construction contract, the 2 projects we're trying to do.
Oh, the ones right below?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's what Greg asked.
Yeah, that's what was confusing.
Okay, and then there's $1 million for School C.
Yes.
Dr. Means, I'm looking at the demolition of old games facility, when I asked for approval on that November 2019. And actually demolition would take place December 2019. And a little bug went off in my head. And I believe we said earlier, Clark Middle would be in skill of 6. And all of, well, I'm gonna say all of, a number of schools in Houston is in those names now. When we do these construction projects, we have used old games to move students in there. Now, are we planning to have on-site instruction with the students still in Clark Middle?
Yes, sir.
If you do that, we won't have old games.
We will not. We have found after a few months at Old Gaines with middle school students that it is not,
Not appropriate.
it's not favorable for the young people to be in that building. And the campus of Clark Middle is large enough where we could stage the construction of a new Clark Middle while keeping the children in the current existing building.
Similar to what we did at Clark Central, although you weren't here. And I don't know how they did it, but whoever did that, they worked, I guess it was John, a year ago.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, Dr. Means, in terms of the funding for the Old Gaines facility, I know you've got the demolition cost, but in terms of the early learning cost, is there a projection? Would it be similar to what you're anticipating for the West Broad?
It would be identical to the cost for the West Broad facility.
When will the board be involved in the conversation about the new district office location and,
Sure.
I mean, I understand there's probably, like it's confidential now, but anyway, when is that?
It is, we as an administrative team, we've been searching for ample space for a district office, candidly since I arrived. And there are limited options for a facility that would meet the needs of all of our entire district office. But we do believe that we're down to a few options that if we are able to get serious with a realtor and a seller in the next few months, we can have a proposal to present to first a property committee, then eventually a full board early 2019.
There are also a couple other things that came out of the decision analysis that are in our notes about Cleveland Road.
Yes.
You want to touch on that?
Sure. In our decision analysis, that it ranged, and that's the beauty of a process. So we looked at a lot of different options for Cleveland Road, and it ranged from maybe not having that online as a school to potentially becoming the new district office to, there are a lot of different options discussed. When you do a decision analysis, one thing that you have to do is run a risk analysis. So even if we've reached this decision, what's the risk analysis? And what we found was it's just not prudent for us to consider closing Cleveland Road. I think it's one of the exhibits in the report, but we just received information from the county that shows new home builds in that area. That has always been a very unique area of the county in terms of either it's a very popular place and it's growth or it slows down. We think it's important to be conservative and to keep that building online and to keep it open. We think we can create better balance with all the other West Side schools if you also have School C in the mix. And so that's why our recommendation, despite the decision analysis, is to keep school or keep Cleveland Road open.
You talked about, how we would, I mean, we have pretty established processes for doing new schools. We have a building committees and a process and whatnot. You talked about how might we think about a process for these places that don't have existing schools, like Old Gaines and West Broad, and how would we engage, how that architect firm that we hire would engage with us about development.
One of the reasons why we conducted the Citizen Oversight Committee meeting this morning is because I think we're going to have to lean heavily on that very important stakeholder group to allow them to weigh in. I think there are also opportunities for us to engage members of PTOs and local school governance teams that are impacted by either the construction of School C or the renovation of what we're describing with West Broad. Karen Hickenbottom, for example, has a very active parent advisory board. We would engage that.
Early learning folks.
Yes. So I think we have ample community groups that we would bring in to the fold if there's an affirmative vote by the board. I think it's in the conclusion portion of the report where I said that these are all preliminary recommendations right now. If there's an affirmative vote by the board, that's when community engagement begins. That's when we can bring people to the table and have the collaboration that we want with these types of projects.
My observation was, again, kind of like what Jared is saying, especially with what's brought in the new games, because they don't have principals, then they don't really have that embedded community group that's already working with that. So is this one of those opportunities that we would use to maybe even look at the Envision Athens stakeholders that are really concerned with these touch points around education, to see if we can find our stakeholder group there?
I don't think there's an absence of interested and engaged citizens who would want to be part of the design and interest of shaping what these facilities will be. Yes.
What square footage are you looking for in terms of office space? Central office?
We believe when you combine the square footage of the Whitehead Annex, that's where we have our financial shop place. What we use here, it's in the neighborhood. I guess John told me, I don't want to throw out a number that's inaccurate.
65.
So it's around 65,000 to 70,000 square feet that we're currently using between Whitehead Annex and HD Edwards right now. So at a minimum, that's where we would want to be in terms of the new district office.
Parking spaces.
We would need a lot. We would want to get it as many as possible.
Now, one thing. I know that we've got the parenting center possibly in 2 locations, and I guess maybe you can justify even being in 3 locations. But do we have the staff to do that?
I think that's Mr. Bybee's question around how sure are we around the lottery funding for early childhood education.
Oh, I thought the parent resource center.
I'm sorry, you're talking about the pit.
Yeah, right.
What we would do is we would move the current team that's here into the West Broad facility.
So that would not be part of the central office.
The team that's currently staffed here, we would move them to the West Broad.
Okay, and then registration would not take place at the central office that we newly renovated.
No, it would not. Well, let me say that differently. I don't want to make a leap, and that's why we laid it out this way. Each project is independent. And so if we do get a new district office, and we do have a parent information center at West Broad, there's a possibility that we have multiple people for registration's sake at multiple sites. So instead of having the bottleneck that you have sometimes with registration, you can have 2 different locations. But that doesn't mean that you have to staff 2 different parent information centers. I think actually it could be a great convenience for families if there were multiple locations that they could go to and register.
Can we please make those high tech? Yes.
So could you repeat that one more time?
Could we please make those high tech?
It's right, I think registration is on, it's an online model right now, but we.
I'm talking about video from one site to another, so that even if you're walking into a room that's not manned, you can actually have that conversation and share and see each other. I think that gives it more of a personal touch. I would love to see us advance technology as we move forward with this.
It's a great suggestion. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I don't remember if I read this in the packet or if you said it or if it's not even part of it at all, but if we're gonna talk parent information centers and registration and we're gonna talk West Broad and Old Gaines, is there a proposal to put a parent information center and a registration center at Old Gaines?
I think there's that facility and that campus is pretty vast. And so there's a lot of opportunity for, I appreciate what you're sharing. I think this building right here could be used for a lot of different things. And it could be a temporary parent information center during registration periods.
Or
Yes.
all the time? I mean, I think our
Or all
East
the
Side
time,
community
yes.
doesn't, it's not, all the district offices being constantly on the west side, if the parent information center is what you need access to the most as a parent, if we could give access to our east side families, I think that would be.
I think that's why I do appreciate the question that was posed about the conversation we started last evening at our board work session around the partnership with the University of Virginia's, what I want to call transformational programming. That's just one piece of really bringing life to a school community. The other part of it is having facilities where you don't have to come to West Broad to register your child or to have high quality early childhood education. So duly noted, we can explore that. I think what we tried to say in the conclusion of this report was we can't have those conversations unless we have at least a discussion about getting there. I mean, once we have this facility, then we can start becoming more innovative and creative and offering the services that you're suggesting.
We have one of our neediest school communities right there. And so
Yes.
I really think that having a parent resource center or information center right there is a critical component to the success of
We
the
agree.
transformation of that school.
We agree.
My other question, and going back to the decision analysis, I'm tiptoeing into this one. Restructure of attendance zones.
Yes, ma'am.
We can touch on that.
So, yes, we're gonna all tiptoe now for a little bit. One of the factors that led to us recommending the construction of School C is that, frankly, it is the least intrusive recommendation to creating balance, especially on the west side. We could have started redrawing lines without School C, and it would have created, I believe, and our team endorsed this belief, it would have created a lot of community angst. By considering the construction of School C, you avoid a lot of that angst. You're able to slightly reconfigure boundary lines for those west side schools, and you're not upsetting the lines as strongly as you would if you didn't have School C. So candidly, part of the logic for School C is that we know we have a number of kids who live in that neighborhood. We have over 500 kids who live there right now, but we're asking those kids to go to other places. So for example, there's a group of children who attend Chase Street School that live in Rolling Ridge. They actually would be closer to School C than they are currently. at Chase Street. And there's other examples of there's a group of kids who attend Whitehead that would actually be closer to School C than going to Whitehead. So we believe that if we had an opportunity to tell the community, yes, we'll grandfather those who are currently at these schools, but for new families, we can provide you a new school community. And we're not upsetting the community by redrawing lines. So let's have let's just dive into the real conversation about the potential construction of School C. From a diversity standpoint, it could have an impact on certain schools. We know that we have and it was confirmed by the building principal at Whitehead, there's a large Hispanic population that would go to School C that currently goes to Whitehead. And so that would impact their ethnic diversity makeup. I referenced Rolling Ridge and Chase Street. That would adversely, in my opinion, impact the ethnic diversity makeup of Chase Street. And so those are some of the challenges that come along with building School C. I had a chance to speak with the faculty at Gaines this week, obviously because of the news about their identification on a flawed list created by the state, and commentary included. And one of the questions from a staff member was, well, have you looked at maybe rezoning and busing kids to different places? And I'll defer to our legal counsel on this one, but in the history, in the study of history that I've done in Clark County, you used to bus kids. And the Department of Education Civil Rights Division came in and told the community, you should stop. You should stop doing this. This is not an equitable practice. And so our ability to bus kids to create the ethnic and racial balance isn't there. In short, if we're leaning in and saying that we have community neighborhood schools, then we have community neighborhood schools. And how ethnic groups and racial groups move into certain portions of the community, it will impact what the schools look like.
And one thing that bothers me when people, and Linda, I think has really been a good advocate for this, but Chase is a neighborhood school for a neighborhood, but it's not a neighborhood school for Rolling Ridge. And if there is a way to create a neighborhood school that is more accessible for parents and more accessible for students and closer, I'm personally, I think it's bothersome to think about that community not being at Chase Street anymore. I think that has some problems. But to give children and families a neighborhood school, and same with the community along Vincent Drive and all right out there. So anyway, the neighborhood school thing is real, and it's tied to student achievement. We've seen it.
We have good educators who are our principals, and in anticipation of this meeting, I've met with our principals. The principal at Chase Street School, who I believe is a star, and Dr. Neer, when I walked through all of these recommendations and shared the potential impact of the board, said, yes, let's construct School C. She said, you can construct School C as long as I keep my Rolling Ridge kids. And as we continue to talk, we discussed the fact that those kids deserve a neighborhood school as well. She said, I know, that's hard. Luther McDaniel said the same thing about that group of Hispanic students who would attend, that currently attend Whitehead. Dr. Carson at Howard B. Stroud she jumped out of her chair when she said, yes, I want to take the kids who live closer to Stroud, who currently attend Gaines. I want those kids because those are my neighborhood kids. So it's a double-edged sword. In some cases, it's a loss for school communities for sure. In other recommendations here, there's some advantages. It's Mr. Davis, Major Doctor. Mr. Davis, about a year ago, pulled me to the side. He said, "Do you know about Maxine P. Eason, parent choice zone?" I didn't forget what you shared with me, sir. And we know that, again, I can't emphasize this enough, over 90% of the families in that zone, they choose either Barnett Shoals or Wood Davis. They don't pick games. And many of those families live closer to games. And so I'll bring it full circle, that staff member at Gaines who said, "So what about the social economic balance for our school? And how can the district create that conversation?" Part of it is to be more definitive and just to take a leadership role and say, no, here's the boundary lines for a school that we know we're not going to build. That zone was constructed because we were under the assumption that we were going to build the Maxine P. Eason Elementary School. It's going to be an early childhood center now, hopefully, if all it goes well and improves. But if we know that that's our recommendation to not build the school, then we have to make a decision about where those families should go.
Well, and to that end, about neighborhood schools, and I lost my train of thought, but, and Mr. Davis has always been a really big advocate for this too. Gaines doesn't have a neighborhood school either. Their district is long and skinny and not centered around their school, and accessibility for those students and families has always been a challenge as well.
Yeah.
And so I do hope that in the consideration for that Gaines will be afforded the opportunity to have the neighborhood
I think this is the
and the
game.
children who deserve, and all children deserve a new neighborhood school, but, and that will be a more equitable distribution to create a neighborhood school for all families as much as possible.
So looking at that map right now is, where would Nellie be? Would that still be in the Gaines zone? I mean, I'm just.
Yes. So a vast majority of the Nellie B community would still be a Gaines school. Short of building a school in Nellie B, that's difficult to do. I'm going to defer to Mr. Jones and others on our team, but finding a place for the kids who live in Nellie B that they can call their neighborhood school, it becomes difficult because there isn't, I mean, the closest you have is actually Howard B. Howard B. Stroud is closer to Nellie B than Gaines. But a great number of kids from Nellie B go to Gaines. That makes it tough. And so back to what we discussed earlier with the partnership, I want to call them children's zones, where we we work with our LSGTs and we work with community groups to make sure that we're putting support services to not only those schools, but those school communities. I believe that's the way that we approach it. And again, that's where it becomes a yes and. We want to teach well, but we also want to wrap our arms around those kids and provide as many support services as possible.
Can you talk about, pivot just a little bit to the land trust and West Broad? So I think if this, especially the West Broad proposal was something that was on the table 6 years ago, I think my hunch is that across the city, people will be super excited about it, right? I think there's, but at a time when that campus was left alone for a really long time, a lot of folks from the community and that organization, put blood, sweat, tears, and years in making it something that the community is proud of, something that the city is proud of. And so I think that's a lot of where that interest comes from. And I think it's important that we recognize that, important that we recognize the incredible work that's been done. And I know we, as a school district, are only one side of a partnership, right? But can you talk about how we start to that dialogue of going forward with what has been a longtime partner of the school district, the Land Trust, an organization that does great work for the community. What our side of how you approach that conversation with building the collaboration going forward?
I am empathetic to what I'm about to say, because I understand that there are some supporters of the West Broad garden and market that will say anything less than the land trust remaining at West Broad is unacceptable. So let me start there. I understand that there's such deep connection to that space that's something that some people are, that's what they believe, and I think that's fair. The school system, the school district has offered land to the land trust. We've offered the land at Clark Middle and also at Howard and Stroud, and that's in the report. We estimate that the land, the land mass that we've offered to the land trust to continue the partnership is about 1.97 acres of land. And we estimate the amount of land, the current land that they garden, not the entire facility, but what they garden around 0.5 acres. And again, I want to be empathetic. There will be some who will say that's not good enough or that's not acceptable. But it was our attempt to try to find a win-win. The last thing we wanted to do is to create a win-loss situation, that there's winners and losers. We believe that a more deliberate connection to our curriculum that we teach would be very beneficial if we are able to work with the land trust. So let's go back to the conversation with Clark Middle. The principal there is ecstatic about the possibility of connecting the land trust and gardening to what we currently offer. We have agricultural education courses offered at the middle school level right now. There's a sustainability effort and education pathway at Clark Middle right now. And so we believe that could be a great partnership and can actually be something that's connected to our schools. We believe that we could have our other 3 middle schools come to that facility and continue to work with the land trust. Dr. Carson at Stroud is ecstatic about the possibility of creating a curricular alignment between food science and what healthy eating looks like for early, for elementary school students. And so we think that there's a lot of possibility with the partnership that we've offered.
Yep. And I do appreciate that so much in our communities. But I do think that sometimes the way that we phrase things, I know in the question and answer sheet that you gave us in our notebooks, where you pose certain questions and then pose the answers to them.
Yes, sir.
When we talked about working, kind of building on what Jared just said, we're talking about, the question was the proposal for the Athens Land Trust underscored direct support for educational pathways for students. How will these issues be advanced with the district's recommendation? The response is that the district believes that the Athens Community Career Academy can support pathways described in the Athens Land Trust proposal. And I'm not saying we couldn't, but I think that we're stronger as a community if we are at least from the very beginning hoping to sit down and to form these partnerships instead of saying that what the land trust has proposed thus far we can duplicate it. So we really it kind of gives the message that we're not looking for a partner in the way that's particularly question is phrased, in my opinion, that response. So I know some of the issues that they talked about, was like the woodworking and the and the renovation of homes in this particular area. In terms of a woodworking group, commercial kitchen, community health clinic. I mean, it just seems like that there is room for us to, I'm not using the word compromise, but I'm using the word, sit down and engage in dialogue, because I think there's certain things that can be offered, if not at that site. And I mean, I'm not sure if it's just the garden at Clark Middle, isn't the only thing that the Land Trust brought to the table. And so I'm trying to figure out how these other programs that were in their proposal, that many of them they've already initiated, and to me, they do benefit our students, and they do benefit the community, which if you benefit the community, in my opinion, you also benefit students. So, I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but it just seems like that there needs to be some gathering together, and, you know, recognizing that, you know, we can have the bulk of this without every single piece fitting just the way it is in this nice notebook here.
Well, Ms. Vodka deserves a lot of credit for the nice notebook. I would say that I appreciate your statement. But our focus was our strategic plan. And our strategic plan said that we need an Office of Early Learning. Our focus is also creating stronger, better social service options for our kids. And so when you consider that we proposed to create an Office of Early Learning, because we know we have 136 kids on a waiting list to get access to pre-kindergarten. And we are proposing to create a school-based health clinic. There isn't then anything left for what you're proposing and what you're citing as what's also important. I guess, you know, and I would defer to Mr. Harris, Lawrence Harris, or Michael Harris. I would also be curious to know, where do we have construction courses in our school system, and where do we not have construction courses? I think the Young Builders Program is very important, but we need to have a connection between the land trust and where we're offering construction courses. That's stronger alignment to the curriculum. It can't be a program off to the side ran by a nonprofit that's offering a great service. That's amazing. We want that to happen. But as a school district, our first charge is to make sure that connection with our curriculum is clear. It is crystal clear. And so that's really, that's part of the conversation we want to have. That's why we're excited about having the land trust if they choose to take us up on the offer of using the land at Clark Middle. There's great opportunity to align our agricultural education with what they do with the gardening. There's great opportunity to tie food science and some of the work that's happening at the University of Georgia and their fine Department of Food Service with our kids at Howard Sprout. I think there's just, I would, that's why I'm gonna ease into this conversation softly by saying, I understand disappointment from people and respect it. And I'm not here to say you shouldn't be disappointed. That's your prerogative, and I understand it. But I want to be a glass half full person and say that there's a lot of opportunity with a partnership, a deliberate partnership, if the land trust chooses to pursue it.
Well, and to be totally frank, we have, we can't plan the land, we can't plan the program, we can't plan their organization, but we have not had our ducks in a row for a while with regard to that site. And so in the absence of having those things, that side aligned with the strategic plan that they then organizations have a chance to collaborate around, I think there's been an amazing work happen. And I'm hopeful that with our ducks in a row, that can continue in a way that builds
partnership
for our kids.
and trust. Mr. Bobby, I guess I've said this publicly before, but I think during the spring time period, the submission of requests for information, I think it was lost. But let me say this very clearly. I agree with you. I think the condition in which the land trust stepped in and addressed deferred maintenance on the part of the school system is something that should be supported and recognized and celebrated. That at the end, and I'm not trying, and it's difficult for me to say being the neophyte and the newcomer here, but when you look at facilities, there was a level of deferred maintenance where we just didn't invest, and we had community members step in a vacuum and help. And so again, I understand, and I'm sensitive to the disappointment that people may have. And you're right. There's new leadership here who wants to be strategic, and candidly, that also starts with the board. Upon my arrival, you've asked for more metrics, you've asked for more measurements, you've asked for more strategic thinking, and so systems thinking. You've asked for that work, and so we're trying to just meet the needs that you've in the charge that the needs that you've identified in the charge that you've given. And that, if I may, I think that's the reason why we're proposing to do something with old games as soon as possible. Because when you allow facilities to sit vacant, it becomes an eyesore for the community. You drive past those facilities every day and wonder, so what are they doing with it? And so going back to that children's zone approach, but when a community and a neighborhood can say, my school district is investing in the kids here, in the community here, and we think there's a great opportunity to partner with the county government as well, and to have some of those facilities built on that campus, it's encouraging.
Dr. Reese, I'm going to take you back to another place. As we look at the potential makeup for each of the schools and the end project of product of what you're recommending here, are we going to be able to see demographically what those schools look like?
Yes.
Okay, I've got a couple questions if that's okay.
Yeah, just before you answer those, ask those, I do want to hear those. In terms of the time check, we're about 8:12 now. Let's hear a couple of final questions, and we look forward to some more of this tomorrow. If you want to wrap up about how we roll into tomorrow. Go ahead.
So with regard to Westboro, I've got two questions. With regard to Westboro, and John might be able to help me with this because I couldn't put my hands on it in the binder. What's the total square footage of what's being planned to be constructed?
The existing buildings, 10,700 historic building. The new facility would be 27,000 square feet.
Good, thank you. And then from the different perspective, from the devil's advocate perspective, looking at enrollments in our elementary schools versus the capacity of those schools, the 3 of them are 185 over capacity, but the other 11 are 1,000 under capacity. And from what I could tell from the projections done by the University of Wisconsin, the enrollment trends will be somewhat downward through 27-28 here. So the question from a fiscal conservative position is, can we afford to do another school? Are we going to look at it in 2028 and say, okay, well, we had trend lines that looked like we were going to be flat or downward on enrollment, and we weren't actually over capacity throughout our elementary schools. That's the devil's advocate. I'm interested in your response.
I think the schools that are impacted by School C are showing strong trends of continuing to have interest in more enrollment. So when you look at when you look at Chase Street, when you look at Whitehead and Timothy in particular, those are 3 fairly popular communities that have sustained their their populations. I think when you look at the trends from the applied population lab that did our forecasting, they were mixed in terms of some of those school communities. And the caveat that the applied population lab will always provide is the true community trend of what the purchasing of homes look like is something that you just have to watch on an annual basis.
I'd like to throw Oglethorpe into that mix as well from my day job, just the desirability of that area of town, given proximity to amenities and people, and the price point. People are very attracted to that, and the school, yeah, people are very attracted to that area of town. And I would echo what you said about Whitehead, Timothy, and Chase, and throw in Oglethorpe as well as a school that I think we're going to continue to see growth.
So it was interesting. One of the principals that's still on that side of town, when I met with the principals, they said, "So I'm okay. My school's okay." And so I think your question, the devil's advocate question, is fair from a fiscal perspective. The low population of certain schools in the district really speaks to, are we truly committed to low class size or not? And the low class size philosophy is a condition to some of those smaller schools.
In terms of time, we were at 8:16, and I know we wanted to wrap up. I think we have sleeping bags laid out for tonight. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Sure.
We made it. Again, I want to thank this team. They did the heavy lift that they deserve it. They did amazing work, and the detail around many of the things that I hope people read the report there, and they all deserve a lot of credit. So when we talk about a community school model, we understand that that's going to take a lot of time. That it takes a lot of time to engage people, but we understand that that's a necessary thing in this community. But we want to get on that path, and Dr. Myers and her team, they're starting. They hit the ground running. John Gilbert and his team and district services did an amazing job. Fabian Jones and Jim Gurley, they were fantastic and understand. They know each nook and cranny of this community by overseeing our transportation. They did a great job. Lawrence Harris deserves a lot of credit by he connected the dots between where we want the Career Academy to go and the reason why he needs us to get out of here as soon as possible. And he reminds me weekly, at least, that it's time to go. And so we appreciate that assistance. Mr. Harris and Dr. Nolan did an amazing job in helping us understand the curricular impact of early childhood education. We don't call it childcare, it's early childhood education, which then allows me to pivot to Karen Hickenbottom, who's an amazing educator, cares about our kids, and was the staunch advocate before we even started the process of saying, we need something on the east side now. Lynn Duke is keeping us all fiscally aware. And so the numbers that we talk about it and making sure that we have the right staff there is, Lynn did a great job there. Zanona Thomas has opened a school here, and she knows this community. And so ranging from when she took me to Nellie B to a sinkhole and showed me how kids live in Nellie B, actually closer to Stroud than others. She knows what this community needs and wants, and did a great job of leading us there. Our legal counsel has kept us on the straight and narrow, and I think the community needs to know that Mike Pruitt continuously said, nice ideas, continue to be as creative as you want, but when you use district dollars, it has to be for an educational purpose first. We really didn't talk about that tonight, but I appreciate our legal counsel keeping us focused on whatever we decide to do with these renderings and ideas that it's got to be about education first. And so while we may be philosophically and morally driven by putting kids first, Attorney Pruitt made sure that it was also legally sound. And so that's our team from I believe I'm sorry, I forgot Claire. That's the name of the name people. But Claire Suggs she has the pulse of what's happening not only in the Gold Dome in Atlanta, but also in DC. She's a parent that's impacted by some of these conversations. And so from a policy standpoint, not only internally here, but also statewide and from a federal standpoint, we had insight on what is the trend with investment around early childhood education. We tried to create a win-win with this. This was not about an either or. It was I know that I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it was a yes and. So we believe that we can work with any community partner and accomplish what we want to from an educational standpoint. We believe that we can enhance what we do academically and provide better services from a community school standpoint. We're trying to meet the middle here. We also tried to meet the middle in regards to recognizing the rich history of education in Athens, Clarke County by extending a current partnership with the Athens Industrial and High School and the Barney Harris High School Alumni Association. We're going to sit down with them immediately if you give us the green light on this project and create something very special in regards to recognizing the contributions of all people in this community around education. So we're proud of the work, but we welcome questions, and I'll conclude by saying, and we know that if the board says yes and gives us the ability to really create a transformational vision for the district, there will be ample opportunity for all stakeholders to be involved in the design of these ideas.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. We put that email address back up again for questions if anyone in the community has them. So tomorrow morning we are back here at 9:15, and as anyone and everyone is welcome to join us here at 9:15. And we have more time to engage in questions. We have more time to dig deeper into the specific recommendations you're making and why. And so we can get kind of next level depth tomorrow. If there are no further questions, is there a motion to adjourn? Ms. Davis, second by Dr. Knox, all in favor? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lee.
You did your question?
Yes.